is that the meditation community will be large enough and deep enough to prevent the worst from happening. A lot depends on on our meditation. Our thoughts are powerful. Our thoughts affect so much. I mean, you look at all the anger that's in the world right now, the anger and fear. Well, that's creating all the disruptive, the wars, the climate instability. It's like the outer world is a reflection of the inner. Our anger and fear is destabilizing the outer world.
What's up, guys? Welcome back. Welcome back. I have an amazing guest for you today. I have Dena Merriam today joining the show. Dena, thank you so much for taking the time.
Happy to be here.
So, you've written so many books, and the last two books that I picked up had to deal with past lives. And I'm curious to what your process is in remembering those past lives. Is it a meditation, or is it during the writing that you're picking up past life memories?
Actually, all my books are about a recording of my memories because I don't know what else to write but my own experiences. And most often, my first book, My Journey Through Time, uh, began. I think I've always had glimpses. Some people, the veil doesn't fully close when they're born. They've always had glimpses. But at a certain point in my life, um, I started having full recall of the whole narrative of a life. And the first time it happened to me was when somebody came into my life from my previous birth and started talking to me about things. And that was like a trigger. So there's always a trigger, something that sets it off. And so I began to recall all the events of my birth just previous to this, which I wrote about in that book. And then I thought that was it. And then a year or so later, I met somebody else, and that set off the trigger for the birth just previous to that. And so I went back about 5 lives, and it was all through people who came into my life. And it's interesting because as soon as my narrative was complete, they disappeared from my life. So clearly there was a purpose in me meeting the people to stir memories. And I began writing about it really for my own interest to see the connection between lives. How does one life impact the next? This law of cause and effect, how does it work? So that's why I began writing about my experiences to try to understand what the process is, this long journey that we're on. And who are we? If we've had so many births, who are we really? And so that's how I got involved in just sharing my own memories.
That's how I got involved. Yeah. Uh, Cause and effect, right? So I think of cause and effect in a linear fashion, right? Is that how you define it? Like, what's your interpretation of the law of cause and effect?
I think unlike what people think of it as like punishment and reward, it's really not like that. It's a process of growing. And so if you have certain patterns of thinking in one life, unless you outgrow those patterns, they follow you. If you have an unresolved relationship, a troubled relationship, well, that relationship will come back to you. It might not be in the next life, it might be 3 lifetimes down the road, but at some point, you've got to resolve everything that's unresolved. And at some point, you've got to outgrow the tendencies and the patterns of thinking and behavior that are harmful, that are impeding your growth. So we get multiple opportunities to do this. And so the more we can sort of live mindfully and pay attention, the less likely are we're going to have to repeat it. It's like if you don't get the message the first time, you knock your head against the wall, it hurts, but you knock your head again, it hurts. You do it a third time. Hopefully you won't do it a fourth time. Hopefully you'll learn this hurts. I shouldn't do this. And I think that's how it works. But if you look at what I've been able to see is looking back at my past, is the pattern, the beautiful interweaving of one life to another, and relationships that aren't fulfilled come to fulfillment at a future time. So it's really a beautiful process. If you can stand back and look at the whole thing, it's a beautiful process.
Hmm. So is that karma, right? Is karma
Karma, that's
really
karma.
is
Yeah,
karma really checks and balances, or is it just kind of like a concept that we use to keep people in check and like really trying to do good work, you know?
it's checks and balances. I mean, I think everything is energy, right? Thought is energy. So whatever you put out has a result. So if you put out negative thoughts, it's going to have a negative effect, and your deeper self is going to want to repair that. So it's not your, your superficial, your ego thinking self, but at a deeper level, if you've hurt somebody, you want to repair that. There are multiple ways that you can repair that. Multiple ways. It's not one way. But and you sort of determine your own course. I mean, there's no judgment. Nobody's judging you and saying, punishing you for what you did. It's you yourself, your deeper self wants to outgrow the things that are causing harm and be a positive force and bring benefit. So it's a way of the universe rebalancing itself.
Hmm. I'm very curious. How do you experience reality, like everyday reality?
Big question. Because there are moments when I'm fully in the here and now, and I'm dealing with whatever's right in front of me. And then there are moments that I'm aware of living in another time period, the past, and I'm also aware of a future. And just as the past has shaped our present is shaping the future. So at a certain point in your life, you can begin to see the blueprint. I mean, as you sort of reach a certain stage in life, you realize that a lot of things are already set. There are relationships that have not been completed, you'll complete in the future. The aspirations, desires that you haven't been able to fulfill, you'll have another opportunity to do that. So you can sort of see where you're going. And so I live with an awareness of the past and people from the past who've meant a lot to me, who are not in my circle now, but I'm aware of them vibrating somewhere in the universe, and I'm aware of the connection, and I'm very aware of the future.
Mm. Wow, that is such a great answer. Like I just was not expecting that. What So these relationships, these experiences, these moments in the past and the future, do you experience them like I'm experiencing this conversation with you, like as vividly as this, or is it more like a movie in your mind? Is it your third eye? Is it your imagination? Like, what does that look like?
In a way, it's like being in a movie, but I definitely am sucked back into a movie. And I know who I am in the play, and I hear conversations, and I get the teachings. I think the main point for me is that through this process, I'm able to understand the teachings that were given to me at an earlier time that I didn't understand then. So it's like I'm given another opportunity to say, aha, now I get it. Now I get it. Now I'm at a stage in my development where I can understand much more. So it's interesting because I'm writing a book called Memories of a Future Life, which projects myself 200 years into the future. So I'm looking at a more awakened version of myself. When I see the past, I see a less awakened version of myself, somebody who's still stumbling along the way, making mistakes again and again, and not sort of getting the messages. That's my past. But now I'm projecting into a future where I'm at a much more developed stage. It's an interesting
So yeah,
process.
it's so interesting because like, is it a part of the same soul? Is it the same I? Like, what does it say about the individuality of the soul if you're having all these different experiences throughout time? Like, is the persona an illusion? And like, what does it really look like from the other side?
So when I look at my past selves, I see aspects that I've retained. So in a way, I say I'm the culmination of everything I've been. I'm not that person anymore. So I look like in my recent book in Tibet, I'm not that Tibetan woman anymore. And yet I recognize things about myself that I've grown so much in the intervening period. And yet it makes total sense that I lived that life and was struggling to resolve certain things that have totally resolved in me now. So I look back at the past and say I'm not those personalities, and yet I recognize I've maintained a little bit of each of the personalities, and the culmination,
Mhm. Hmm.
that's who we are. We're the culmination of all we've been.
The culmination, all of it, right? Like even the bad stuff.
Bad stuff, hopefully we've shed, but maybe you can identify an aspect, a weakness that you once had that you no longer had, that you freed yourself from.
Hmm. So how do you, if you have the bad stuff, right? Like everybody wants, it feels great to know all the good stuff, but with the bad stuff, right? How do you move through that, or how do you heal some of that, or how do you kind of transcend that?
Well, I mean, there are I mean, bad stuff can manifest in many ways. For example, suppose you're a jealous person. You just have a lot of envy of friends who are successful, who have beautiful relationships or whatever. Um, you've done in the past, you've done things out of jealousy. And now at this current life, maybe you just have a little tinge of it. Not a lot, but you have a little tinge. And you want to work on it. One way, and this has been interesting because I've seen myself be everything. I've seen myself be a pauper. I've seen myself be a princess. And so really what is there to want when you've done everything? I've seen myself having a beautiful relationship, a beautiful marriage. I've seen myself having a lonely life, being alone in life. And so I've said to myself, I really have had it all. There's nothing more to want in the earthly way. It's like I can't aspire to be wealthy. I've been wealthy. And I can't aspire for a beautiful marriage. I've had that. And so once you've seen that, it helps you get over uh, these, whatever jealousy you might have, or just sense of. I mean, there's so many ways these negative self-worth. I know that I had multiple lifetimes of not having a sense of self-worth, and in this lifetime, I've had to really conquer that. But I see that it was something that was with me for many lifetimes.
Sure. I was reading Edgar Casey's book today. I picked it up randomly and flipped to a page and started reading an excerpt from it. And he was talking about doing these kind of life readings on individuals for past lives. And he was like, I don't really like doing them. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here because he said that he would tell some people that you were rich in one life, or you were famous in one life, or you had X, Y, and Z. And immediately he saw some type of like, okay, I've done that. And now I'm going to just kind of relax and not really pursue any type of excellence in my life, right? Like he said, it could be dangerous in that people would resort back to mediocrity, right? And that they wouldn't pursue whatever their soul purposes were here. He said that soul purpose or soul evolution was, I, 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 I'm paraphrasing here, but it was like the soul purpose is on this downward spiral until you have this awakening. And then it's really meaningful when you use your free will to kind of go back up that chart and really consciously start trying to evolve. And I thought that was powerful because how many times have we had a past life regression or something where people are always saying, "Yeah, I've been this famous king or I've been this rich guy," and then like, I mean, does that really take pressure off of you from really trying to achieve something in this life? I don't know. However, I don't remember that part of myself, so I still consider myself to be working towards different goals in this life. But I just thought it was interesting how he put it in that context of like, if people find out they were certain individuals in past lives, they may, for whatever reason, take a break in this life and not fully evolve, if that makes sense.
I don't think it's helpful to go back into the past unless it happens organically. I would not go to past life regression because what's the point of knowing you as so and so unless For me, the lessons have been, first of all, understanding the law of cause and effect and how one life weaves into the next and seeing it as a beautiful tapestry. And the other lesson for me has been the teachings that have come to me, teachings about love, love being the one thing that you take with you, the one thing um, that doesn't dissipate. And so there have been many, many important teachings, but it's all happened organically with me. I mean, what would be the point of somebody saying, "Oh, you were King so and so"? Well, how does that help you?
Yeah,
If you remember, something happens where you remember being a king or whatever, but that's not the main thing. The main thing is that you did an important thing, or you helped somebody, or somebody gave you an important lesson. And then that lesson is what stayed with you, not the fact that you were a king. Because I found the external things, whether you're this or that, are much less important than the growth that you've gained. So, I haven't seen all my lives, or many lives I haven't seen, but there are pivotal lives. Those are the ones that I've seen where a lot of growth takes place because of certain conditions, or because of your own searching, where growth takes place. And I think I mean, we never stop aspiring, but the thing is not to aspire for the outer conditions, but for the inner growth.
sure. Have you ever seen a past life, like during a historical moment in time?
Well, my previous birth, I was died during World War II. That was an hysterical. I think a lot of people on Earth now died during World War II. Um,
Do you remember like where you're at, what took place, and how you died?
I saw the whole movie, and I
Really?
actually, because it was my first recall, I actually went to the places that I saw. I went to the place that I saw my death, and I found it. And then I went to the place where the city where I recalled my birth, and I found neighborhoods that looked like what I remembered. And so, because I was also doubting myself, what is this that I'm seeing? How do I know it's real? And so I checked myself out just the first time, just things about my previous birth, where I was able to check things out. I mean, the further back in time you go, you can't check it out. But I was something of a detective, sort of checking out what I'd seen. And then I stopped doing that after a certain point because I realized the growth that was coming to me from seeing all this, the understanding and the learning, that was what was important, not the details of what I was seeing.
Well, what about the validation, right? It should have been validation for your own process that you're able to do this and then get, I guess, after you validate that process that you're receiving information that is accurate, that can kind of um, make the message even more important. Like I don't know how you validated that. Did you know the person's name? I mean, how did you validate that?
I went to, I had an image of the place that I had died, and and a scene that had happened at that place. And historically, I found out that was accurate. That did take place at that place. And I went to that city, I went to that street, and I found the scene that I had seen in my mind. And other things, a name of a university that I had never heard of turned out to be true, real university. And people from that university, it turned out to be that they were also real. I mean, all this came through me, and somebody from that time entered my life and started speaking unconsciously with references to that time. He
Mhm.
wasn't conscious of it. He didn't have any recall. He probably didn't even believe in it. But he started speaking to me in another language. He thought it was fun, I suppose, but it all sort of like stirred the pot, and I began to have the memories. And so that was the only time I could really validate certain things because it was close in time. I could do it. But further back you go, how are
Sure.
you going to validate?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, so, but that showed me that the process, and I've come to understand the process, which most often comes to me. I mean, it's part of my meditation. I've been meditating for many years, and the meditation often channels things. It brings things. It like opens the portal.
I
you know,
love it. I love it. You're a portal. I love it.
horrible.
Stargate. What? So you validate this information. You see this. I'm sure there's got to be some type of traumatic event or memory for you right now, right? There's got to be something that you're feeling. Do you heal that? Is there a process that you use to heal that? Do you just move through it? Do you sit with it? Like, what does that look like?
Actually, it was a process, actually. It was a process. In the birth just previous to this, I had lost my mother at a young age. I was very attached to that mother. And I started grieving again. And I said to myself, this is crazy. You're grieving for a mother who died, what, 100 years ago? Not, more like 80 years ago. But I had to go through that until I felt that I connected with her soul, which I did. And that was healed. But in my previous birth, I had not healed that loss. So I healed it in this life. And then I had a troubled relationship with my father in that life. And that all came out again. And so I spent about a year and I said to myself, it's like I don't want to relive this life. I want to get back to my current life. But I did connect with the soul that was my father in that birth, and that got healed. So we do carry things. So what happened though, interestingly, is in this life I had a difficult relationship with my mother. Seeing all that, I said to myself, I'm not going to wait till the future. I'm going to resolve this relationship now. And I put a lot of effort into really healing my relationship with my mother in this life. I kept comparing it to my previous mother, who was very different, and that was totally unfair. And the last few years of my mother's life, we developed a beautiful relationship. I took care of her. It was really beautiful. So it was because of my experience that I paid more attention to what I needed to do in this life.
Wow. Yeah, Tom Campbell's talks about this, where if we all remembered all of the relationships that we ever had and the losses and the trauma and the events that took place, like we wouldn't be
Overwhelming.
able to live right now in this moment. So I feel you on that 100%. Like and it's also almost like a curse too, because it's like you're remembering all of that. And now you have to process that information and now you have to, process the trauma and you have to move through that. And then you have to connect on a soul level to really heal that. And then, you know, go to work, like take care of your kids,
It
it's,
was destabilizing. I was a single mom raising two teenage sons, working a job, and here I was finding myself back in Europe during World War II. It was destabilizing. That's why I say to people, if I didn't have my meditation practice, I don't know what I would have done. You
do you
know,
think there are people out there that have these memories all the time?
I think that there are many people who have glimpses because people have written to me and they say, in reading your book, it awakened a memory in me. I think it's rare to have a whole narrative.
Hmm.
And I think that it was given to me so that I can share it, and um, and show how this law of cause and effect works. I mean, there's a reason why I have these memories to share. In helping the reader, because in all my books, I go through multiple lives. The more recent book in Tibet covers 3 lives. Starts in Tibet, it goes back to a previous birth in medieval France, and then it goes forward into the next birth in India. So you see how 3 lives are connected to each other. A relationship that couldn't be fulfilled in France gets fulfilled beautifully in Tibet, but other things that aren't resolved in that life gets fulfilled in the next life. And so people can then look at their own life. You have a beautiful marriage. Well, maybe that's something that you really wanted for a long time. And you knew that person and you just couldn't get together. But now in this life, that whole thing can manifest,
Hmm.
most people have a relationship issue with a family member that they just can't get along with, something like that. And so there's a cause for that. It didn't just happen out of nowhere. There's an earlier cause.
Uh, so what is reincarnation? Like, why do we experience that, right?
Some of us, most of us inside like the earth and want to come back, and I laugh when I have some of my spiritual friends say, I'm not coming back here. And I say, right, yeah. You might stay up there for 100 years or out there, wherever there is. But most likely, if you're not coming back for karmic compulsion, you come back to serve, I mean, you've got loved ones here who are still here. You want to be of service.
So who are we really then, right? Like you said,
That's the big
reincarnation,
question.
that is
Who
the big
who are
question.
we?
Like who are we? Like what's your interpretation of that?
So there are some scenes in the book in Tibet where a teacher, in the latter part, the part that takes place in India, a teacher tells a student, she says, "Who are you?" And she gives her name, thinking that the teacher forgot her name. And the teacher says, no, 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 no. She states her family, where she came from, and the family's profession. She goes through all the things that define her. The teacher says, no, no, no. Then the teacher says, you go into that hut and stay until you know who you are. So she goes into that hut and she experiences her past births and she gets more confused. Well, who am I? I was this one and I was that one and I was that one. And she goes back and back and back. And finally, she has an experience of her soul, of the grandeur. She's everything. She's the whole. She's one with it all. And then the teacher comes and says, "Okay, now you can come out yet now." And she says, "But I haven't found out who I am." Teacher says, "You're on the right road. you know, you're heading in the right direction." So I think I can't answer that question because I haven't yet come to the end of that road.
You're on the right road.
But I think it's the search. I mean, that's what the teacher said. It's the search, the fact that you're searching that matters. And in meditation, you have experiences where you experience yourself as, like part of the cosmos. Your consciousness expands and you realize that you're not the body, you're not the mind, you're something separate, different from that.
Mhm.
How we don't really have the language to describe what that is. You can experience it, but it's hard to find the words to describe what that is.
So you've experienced past lives and you're writing a book about the future life. Have you ever had an experience in between?
Yes, and
Really?
I write about that in the book of the and I've started, instead of using the word death, I call it the return because we've spent more time in the other dimensions. What once was called the celestial world, I think we now would call other dimensions. Subtler dimensions, light dimensions. Our vision is very, very narrow, what we can see. Our hearing is very narrow, what we can hear. I mean, there's a whole scale of things. So you asked me how I experience reality. We construct reality based on a very, very limited amount of information. We can only pick up certain, for example, my guru said the astral world is another dimension of reality, a light world, is much vaster than the physical universe, and it's right here, but we can't pick it up. We can't see it. And so there are light beings that he used to see. When he used to give a talk, he said, if you could see all the beings who've come to listen to me, you'd be in the room, you wouldn't see it because we don't have the bandwidth to see it. And it's the same thing with hearing. But I'll tell you an experience that I had. But I write about that other dimensions between births. And I had an experience 2 years ago when I was very close to my father, and he passed away, and he was 100, so it was really a gentle passing. But I wanted to find him, and so I was calling out to him for about 2 weeks, connect with me. And then I heard him call my name and I saw where he was. And he's given me messages at really key times when there's things in the family going on. So I know where he is and I'm connected to him. And I don't feel a loss. I really don't feel lost because at the end of his life, he had lost so much capacity, but now he's got all that capacity back. And
Mhm.
so this has happened with other friends too who have passed, and I've been able to see where they are and be in communication with them. But with my father, it was the first time I actually heard him speak to me,
Like an audible voice.
an audible voice. And the same time, my oldest sister, that same night, she also heard him. And so not only did I hear him, but I saw him.
Wow. Are all your friends and your father in the same place?
No,
No.
And my mother, who passed 6 months after my father, was in a different place. I mean, it's like you go to the place that your soul kind of harmonizes with. So depending on your evolution, you may want to go to past to where relatives are, and the people that you may want to go to where the devas, where the high beings are, where a lot. I mean, there's so much that goes on. That's a whole world into itself.
Sure.
And I would like to someday write a book about that world. So I think there'll come a time when, the cutting edge physicists and the sages of old are coming closer and closer. So the physicists are coming to scientifically discover what the sages have said.
Hmm.
Quantum physics, talking about non-local consciousness, and talking about other dimensions, string theory, where this universe could only, Einstein's theory could only work in a multidimensional universe. So so I actually follow modern physics because I think that religion is kind of outdated in many ways, and that the language of the future will be scientific. I think young
Sure.
people will respond to it because, religion is about belief and doctrine and following rules, whereas people want their own experiences. And I think, and they want to know scientific, but I mean, there's a limit to what the rational mind, so there's a limit to what science can uncover. But I think there'll be a coming together,
Hmm. Like a convergence almost, right?
almost a convergence. Yeah.
What if we're all just kind of walking around in our own little dimensions, right? Um, like our own little bubbles of worlds that are just totally separate from one another and only come together when we have these interactions. I always wonder about that because it's like we're all just so subjective and we all have our own experiences. It's like the five guys in the elephant story. Like, I mean, that's why I'm so interested in hearing your interpretation of how you experience reality because I mean, it sounds totally different than how I experience it. I don't have past life memories, or maybe I have glimpses. I just don't. Maybe it's because they happen so frequently. I don't, I don't know what they are. But I just find it so fascinating that people like yourself that are out there having these experiences, and it's showing you proof for yourself and for them that reincarnation is actually real, and that the evolution of the soul is actually real, and like the law of cause and effect has has as a purpose. Like it's like interweaving itself into our past lives and future lives, and just kind of it's like this rhythm almost. It's like this. I don't know. I don't. Maybe it is checks and balances. Who knows? But something's going on that we cannot totally interpret in this moment.
I think you've got a point there. I mean, in the books on physics that I've been reading, they talk a lot about that there has to be an observer for something to be real. So that if a tree falls in a forest, but there's no observer, did the tree fall? And I don't really think scientifically. I'm really interested in this because I want to see where the convergence, but that's not the way my mind works. But I understand what they're saying is that the observer sort of gives reality to what's being observed, and we all observe it differently, right? Two people go to the same event and come away with different stories. And I mean, we're sort of entering a point in our development where with AI now and social media, that's we are all living in different realities, and it's hard to agree on a set of facts. And maybe that's just an exaggeration of the way it really is. And so the question is, do we need some shared reality in order to have a life on Earth? I mean, do we have to agree on certain things? We might perceive it differently, but is there such a thing as, in the relative sense, facts?
Mhm.
So, in the ultimate sense, there are two ways. There's the ultimate, and then there's the relative. And we have to live in the relative world, and we have to live together as a community. So we need some kind of shared reality if we're going to live together as a community. And I think that's one of the challenges we're facing now.
Sure, because everyone's changing, right? Um, wow, that's so fascinating. So uh, the law of cause and effect, how does that work for future lives, right? Because my mind automatically wants to go in a timeline, a chronological order. Like, does the future life impact this moment just like the past life impacts this moment?
I'm still at the exploratory stage with that. Sometimes I feel like I've already lived my future life. I mean, time, there really is no such thing as time or space, right? It's a construct. The mind constructs it, and so you can say everything is happening now. When I journey into the past, it's the now, and the future can be the now. But again, if we're going to live an Earth life, we have to have a linear timeline. You're born, you're a child, you're an adolescent, you get older, and you return. And so we that's the only way we can construct. But ultimately, through spiritual awakening, you live in a different you live in a different consciousness where you can transcend time and you transcend space. I mean, my Guruji, if he was able to commune with people in different dimensions, that means that space, he was transcending space.
Sure.
And I'm sure time also, he, could go into the past, could go into the future. It's the rational mind has trouble grasping this. Intuitively, we can sense what that might be like, like when I have these experiences of contact with somebody in another dimension, right, who's passed on from this world. My rational mind says, well, where is that? It's where, but maybe where is not relevant. It's not aware.
Well, maybe where is here, right? And it comes back to that now moment, right? Everything is right here
Yeah.
at this point. I'm very interested in your guru. Like, who is your guru?
Paramahansa Yogananda. And Paramahansa Yogananda, I didn't meet him in the body because he passed away. But um, I was just gotten to college and I was searching, and the first one I came across was Ram Dass. He had just come back from India and he'd written this book, Be Here Now, and I read that book and it just really stirred my curiosity. And then the next book was Autobiography of a Yogi. So I read that book and was sad to find out that he had passed uh, because Ram Dass's guru, named Crowley Baba, was still in India. And, many people were saying, oh, you've got to find a guru who's in the body. But as soon as I saw Yogananda's picture on the cover of his book, I fell in love with him. I recognized him. He's mine. So
Hmm.
it's not like I could go find another guru. He's mine. So I wrote to the organization, and they gave me the teachings of Kriya Yoga, and I started practicing. And then I began to have dreams of him, where he actually gave me personal initiation through dreams. And it's to me, it was the intensity of our connection and his presence in my life that, as a guide, as a teacher, as someone who had such an overwhelming love. It was the love for his students. And then when I recalled my past birth, I mean, 20 years after I had found him, and I recalled my past birth, and I recalled that I had met him, my
Hmm.
past birth. He didn't leave America except once. He came from India in 1920 to bring the teachings of India here. He only went back to India once, 1935 or 36, and he was passing through Europe, and he passed through Germany. And I happened to have was searching at that time and had been reading and wanting to get more teachings, and had an encounter with him, very brief, but that was the connection made. And I wanted to get to America because I knew he was based in America to study with him. But I died, and on my death, he came to me and said, "I've come to take you to America." And so I was reborn in America. So I had that at the end of my life, I desperately wanted to get to America, so that's an example of, it's just another chapter. It's like you're reading a novel. One chapter ends and you wonder, well, what happens next? She wanted to get to America. Oh, she's born in America. She
Wow. So what was he like in your dreams? Like when you guys were
powerful,
communicating? Yeah.
powerful, powerful presence, emitting, I mean, such an intensity and powerful presence and an overwhelming love that's unlike any kind of emotion that you feel. We have many kinds of love for a mother, for a child, for a beloved, but this was of a quality that was different, and I don't really have the words for it. Unconditional, inclusive, just powerful force of love. And it's a message that that I've gotten throughout my books. That is the foundation of the universe, love.
Hmm.
That power is that power is a powerful force.
Sure.
That
No,
that
I agree.
kind of love.
Did you meet Sri Yukteswar or Sri Guru Babajii?
Babaji, yes, I've had some experiences of Babaji, not Shukteshwar, um, although I've been very interested in him because, he's got this whole theory, which is a common theory in India of the Yugas, which means that time goes in cycles. It's not just linear. I mean, there's, the linear evolution, but then there's also a cyclical movement. And so that's been an area of study for me. And Shukteshwar, who was an astronomer and a mathematician, we calculated. So that Yugas is basically our solar system's movement through the galaxy. And as it moves through the galaxy, it encounters different areas of magnetic energy, which stimulates spiritual growth. So, so Shukteshwar, I have not had a personal experience with him, but I've been very interested in his intellect and studying some of his theories.
Hmm. So tell me about Babajii.
What can you say about Babaji? No, I just got back from India actually. And in India, I encountered so many different people who said, "Oh, their master, they goes back to Babaji." And I have to say to myself, yeah, how do I know if it's real or not? Everybody's claiming a connection to Babaji. How do I know? And so I've increasingly realized that Babaji's become more and more known in the world, and everybody wants to be connected to him. But Babaji is, one of the even within masters, there are degrees of consciousness, like Yogananda once said, Babaji's evolution was 1,000 times his. How can we understand that? I mean, when I look at Yogananda's consciousness, it's so far beyond. How can I understand anything that's beyond that?
Hmm.
But it's said that Babaji is one of the guides of the world. So he works with, masters throughout the world, sort of guiding their work, helping to evolve, helping the evolution move forward.
Have you had any personal experiences with Babajii? Like in like this reality or in like meditation?
Meditation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did he like what did that look like? I mean, can you speak to it or
Hard to speak to it. I mean, probably that's my most sacred experience with Babaji. And all I can say is that I'm not alone, is that Babaji is very present. And I know people who've had experiences with Babaji. I didn't see him in the flesh. It was more of a consciousness thing. But there are people who see him in the flesh as well. And you can't find him. I mean, there's a remote place in the Himalayas, and I've been to that place, and they say he stays like 20 kilometers beyond that, but you can't get there because of landslides and all that. But even if you were to get there, you wouldn't see him because he stays in a subtle realm, manifesting physically when he needs to. But you could, again, your eyes wouldn't pick up on that level of vibration.
So what is his purpose, right? Like, is he the shepherd of us, like just trying to like, herd the sheep, or is he like just trying to show us what we're capable of?
What people have said is that he and Christ together are guiding this stage of human evolution, of this cycle. So one from the invisible realm and one from the visible realm, because he does manifest a body. So what that means, how can we understand this? I think it's guiding human evolution. I mean, we're going through a difficult time now on Earth, right? You can see things collapsing, things not working, paralysis, wars breaking out, unfinished karma. So a lot of the wars that are breaking out, you look at the Middle East, that's unfinished karma, left over from World War II when Israel was created, the Palestinians had to leave. And so that's unfinished karma that's not been resolved. You look at Ukraine, with the breakup of the Soviet Empire, unfinished karma. And now it's time to finish all this stuff. So we don't just like, let's resolve it. We don't take it into the future. But if you look at the Yuga cycle, 4 yugas, Satya, the highest, Treta, Dwapara, Kali Yuga. We've finished the Kali Yuga, which is the darkest period. And we've come into the next stage and an upward swing. But a lot of the institutions and structures no longer suit this higher energy. And so they're naturally going to fall apart. And so you have a breaking down of structures that don't work anymore. And yet something new hasn't emerged and something new is percolating. And so I think we'll see some kind of reformatting
Mhm.
of an economy that is more equalizing, that works for everyone, more equal, maybe new, different, who knows? It's in the future. I'm trying to see this for my book on the future. What does the Earth look like in 200 years?
Well, what does it look like in 200 years?
I'm in the process of trying to see something.
So when you're writing it, right, and you're seeing visions, like, can you tell us a little bit about like what your life looks like in that book and like what society looks like?
I see spiritual communities as being more important in the future. People are going to want to be clustered with like-minded people, and whether it's actually living in the same space or virtually. I'm trying to see the role that AI is going to play. I mean, the world could be dramatically different. You look back 200 years ago, how different our world is. Um, so I'm sort of playing around with following, if you take this, follow it down, well, what will that lead to? Will we be in communication with other civilizations?
I'm really interested in whether or not we're going to have this convergence of consciousness to where we have an ability to not have to use language, like verbal language, where you and I can communicate mind to mind.
In the higher yugas, that's the way it was. That's why they didn't have writing. They didn't need writing because you can communicate across great distances. You can communicate with animal life and with plant life. You just intuitively, through images. And but it may be that small pockets of people have that. Will everybody be at the same level? Probably not. Everybody's not at the same level now. I mean, you have those who are really doing spiritual work and spiritual practice and are moving along. And then there are those who are going at a slower pace, who
Sure.
don't really have an interest, and just focus on getting food for the day and watching TV.
Netflix and chill. But it makes me curious to like, where did we lose it? Because I feel like there was one language. The Bible talks about it, and like the city of Babel, right? Like they had one language, and then God got angry and then disrupted everything and made everyone have speaking different tongues. But I feel like the one language was mind to mind communication. Like,
Yeah,
was
I
it?
mean, yeah, see, according to the Yuga theory, there's a decline. So the capability, like how were the pyramids built? Mental power. So there was a time when we had much greater mental power. But history begins at 3000 BCE. It doesn't record what came before because there's no record, because there wasn't a need for a record. They didn't need writing. So then there came a time when the mental capacity, so that story of it's not that, God get angry. It's just that humanity developed ego consciousness, individuation, and separateness. We were much more, had a unified field, which is how we can mentally communicate. But in the development of ego consciousness, separateness, I mean, in the higher ages, there were no wars, no concept of domination, no slavery, none of the abuses that we have now, because the consciousness, it wasn't there. It was a much more unified, connected consciousness. But over time, we developed stronger egos and separateness and a sense of I and mine, and humanity just developed into separate tribes.
Sure. So let me ask you this, right? So individuation, how is that different than self-realization?
Individuation is ego consciousness, the sense of mine and I want, and this is mine, and I want to get for myself, and you get out of my way. That's the ego talking. Self-realization is a realization of the higher self, which is that unified consciousness where you see, I mean, even Christ said, "Why do unto others as you would to yourself?" You see yourself in the other. You know that you hurt the other, you're hurting yourself because you won at a deeper level. So it's the soul really is the self-realization, whereas individuation is a stronger ego. I mean, you see the way ego operates in the world, where people don't care about other people. It's all for, let me get what I can. That's the ego.
Mhm. So in the future, 200 years, more of a decentralized living community where we're living in hives and I having more like spiritual practices, like being more
I
spiritually.
think that one of the things that will help us avoid the worst of the climate dislocations is that the meditation community will be large enough and deep enough to prevent the worst from happening. A lot depends on our own meditation, and the fact that spiritual communities continue to grow as they are. I mean, I look back at my earlier life. You had to hide the fact that you were meditating. You couldn't talk about it openly. If you were vegetarian, they thought you had an illness. I mean, these things were just so couldn't talk about karma. These things were not accepted, and now they're widely accepted. And so I've seen a change in my own lifetime. So looking out into the future, another 50 years, it's going to be even more so. And our thoughts are powerful. Our thoughts affect so much. I mean, you look at all the anger that's in the world right now, the anger and fear. Well, that's creating all the disruptive things, the wars, the climate instability. It's like the outer world is a reflection of the inner. Our anger and fear is destabilizing the outer world.
Hmm,
So if people do spiritual practices and manage their anger and fear, there'll be less destabilization.
sure, I agree 100%. Going back to the frequency in spiritual practices and going back and linking this next question to Babaji, you said that people wouldn't be able to see him. I feel like there have been instances and stories that I've heard personally from other people that they have been able to see people, spiritual teachers, and other people haven't been able to see them in the same room. How does someone get to that point to where they can see like spiritual teachers, or how can they increase their frequency so they can have more interactions?
The people who see angels, I don't use that term angels, I call them devis, devas, light beings. Um, I think through spiritual practice. I mean, for me, it's meditation. For others, somebody else, it might be prayer. It might be repeating sacred words, mantra. It could be breathing exercises. I mean, there are many techniques that are available today that were not available a few decades ago. It's much easier to get access to spiritual practices, and I think the key is regular practice. In other words, not doing it just when you feel like it. That's one thing I learned from my guru when I was 20 years old. You got to do it every day. It's like you don't brush your teeth once a week, or when you feel like it, you brush your teeth every day. It's the same thing.
Twice
You
a
get up in the
day.
morning
Come
and you
on.
meditate.
Twice a day. So, is meditation not a filtration, a purification process? Is it like, is that what that is? Like, I mean, I'm sure there's other choices that are associated with that, right? Like, is it living like an ascetic, or is it really just putting in the meditation and using your brain, working that muscle that connects to the higher frequencies, to the higher levels, to the higher planes, to the higher beings? Like, what does it look like for you? Like, do you feel like you're progressing and elevating your spirituality to that point?
Meditation is really quieting the mind so that you can have access to these higher realities. If your mind is busy thinking about, oh, I got to do this and I go to that, and look what someone said to me, and I should have said that to that person, there's no room for anything else. So the whole process of meditation, whether it's through your breathing or whether it's through mantra, is to quiet the mind so that thoughts sort of move into the background. And it's a process that happens naturally, if you sit there long enough. I mean, 5-10 minutes doesn't do it, but if you're really sitting regularly for 30, 40, I sit for an hour in the morning, the mind does quiet down, and then you connect, and it's a lifetime commitment. It's not just a year or two. I mean, I learned early on that this is a lifetime commitment of meditation. And I attribute a lot of the things that I've experienced to my meditation. If I wasn't meditating, would I experience what I experienced? I don't think so.
Sure. I think it's like kind of awakening energy, like inside of us. So, speaking more to meditation and diving a little bit more into that, maybe defining it for people that are listening. I know that you are initiated into the Kriya yoga lineage. And I've seen, you can pull up YouTube and see some of the techniques there, but it's like a method that utilizes the breath to move energy up and down the spine, right? And then in
Prana.
hopes prana energy to
Yeah.
activate the pineal gland and up in the brain. And then once you do that, what does that do? What happens then?
So
Are you
it's magnetizing the spine. So there are different centers of energy in the spine. There's, centers that deal with the self-preservation instinct, a center that deals with the sexual energy, a heart center that deals with your heart energy, love, and then a center that deals with your spiritual sight. And then there's the center up here, which opens your consciousness beyond the body. And what Kriya does is it magnetizes the spine, moving the energy into the higher centers. So you don't want to stay in the centers as the ego consciousness, the sexual drive, and the self-preservation. Self-preservation, that's where fear comes in. Why do you have fear? Somebody's going to hurt me. Somebody's going to do something bad for me. That's that first chakra being activated. So a lot of our responses, you look around at people, they're functioning from those lower energy centers that are just sort of programmed to respond in a certain way. And so you want to deprogram yourself, basically. You want to move your energy into the higher centers so you experience love and joy, and the higher frequencies. And so there are many techniques for this, pranayama, anything that really quiets the mind. I mean, the Buddhists have mindfulness practice where you're sort of observing the mind and letting the thoughts pass through without giving them any credence. Just let them pass through your mind like a breeze. And so there are many different ways to get the mind to quiet down. The technique I work with is the one with magnetizing the spine and working with the higher chakras. The Buddhists have a different approach, but you get to the same goal of moving beyond the rational thinking mind into a higher vibration where you can connect with the things that we can't see and hear.
do you do you do that every morning?
Every morning, and I try to do it again at the end of the day.
Do you ever get shot out of your body?
Not in the way that some people do. Some people, I was reading a book not long ago of this guy who was describing all of his astral travel, how he just finds himself floating. I don't have that experience. I have been aware of myself out of my body. Um, uh, so, but most of my experiences come through memories of. It's like everybody has a different. Some people see lights. Some people find themselves out of the body. Everybody has a different way of experiencing the effects of meditation.
Sure. You know what my biggest fear is, though, and to be completely honest with you, is in this life, if I obtain whatever spiritual maturation there is for an individual or a soul, and maybe this is just the ego talking, but like, and I reincarnate and then I forget it all and like I have to do it over again, right? Like you've had many memories of past lives. Do you find that to be true, or do you kind of pick up where you left off?
You pick up where you left off. No step, it says in the Bhagavad Gita, no step is lost. You pick up where you left off. And that's the beauty of it, what I have found. It's like you take the teachings with you. And when I project myself into the future, I see that whatever I've gained now and will gain in my remaining time, which makes me want to work a little harder, actually, I will carry into the future. Um, and yeah, it's there's no backsliding unless you do something horrible.
Hmm. What's your main purpose here, right? Like as far as your learning objective in this life?
Find out who I am and what this reality is about. What the divine reality is. To 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 know the divine reality.
You know what I love is the synchronicities that I've been having recently. Like I've gone back and started reading Plato, Allegory of the Cave, and linking that to Yogananda's teachings. Like there is a part in his book right here.
I've actually gone back to Plato too.
It's so fascinating. Like,
But
are they
Plato was very influenced by the East. He talked about reincarnation, and he had a little community that was vegetarian.
hmm, what do you think that does for us? When we start taking care of our bodies more, we become vegan or vegetarian, we start speaking affirmations into our water, we start speaking affirmations to ourselves, we start hanging out with different people. Like, what does that do for the body?
I think the body and the mind, it's all connected. It's like you want to be in a pure vehicle. It's like you want your vehicle to be as pure as it can be. If it's unhealthy, it's much harder to do your spiritual work. So you want to be in to have your vehicle functioning as best it can, which is
Well,
why we have to take care of it.
Plato talked about the world of forms. Like he was a big time thought leader in the idea that this wasn't true reality, that there was another world out there, that this was just a projection of that. And the allegory of the cave, which was supposed to be a political piece, in my opinion, was totally about spirituality and how to cultivate a more meaningful relationship with the one, right? The goodness that is out there. He kind of like started I feel like he was um, the initial teacher of like the archetypes, like Jung really, Jung knows he's known for the archetypes, but I feel like Plato really started that work and
I
talking
agree.
about, and talking
Oh,
about the forms that are outside of time and space. Uh,
I agree. For the West, he was monumental, actually, and then came the Neoplatonists, and I think the whole kind of romantic movement really started with Plato in terms of um, uh, uh, their worldview. But there's the latest physics, and there's a book called The Physics of God, which brings this all together. Talks about an energy verse and talks about the physical universe as being a holographic projection of the energy verse, and that we are holographic projections, and that we also are there in that energy verse while we are here.
hmm.
So try to, I mean, so try to connect with ourselves. Sometimes I feel myself in that celestial world, sort
Really?
of like, yeah, I do. I'm aware of myself there while I'm here. I'm
And
just
what are
sort of
you
like,
doing there? Like, when you're aware of
I'm
yourself
sort
there?
of sleeping there while I'm active here.
That is
But then
so
once,
fascinating you said that. Because, like, what if we are just in God's mind and God is sleeping?
then when we disappear from here, we'll wake up there.
Yeah. Wow. because because Robert Monroe in his third book wrote, I don't know if you read him or not. He talks about like going back to the origin of his being, and when he was able to achieve that status, it was like he was waking up from a nap, and he started remembering everything. Like this entire universe, this physical universe, was in his mind. He had created it, but his consciousness, when he became aware, was he was like he woke up and he was surrounded by even larger, bigger consciousnesses that were even bigger than he was, and like he was going like they were going somewhere. He doesn't really just, describe where they were going, but they were like, yeah, you haven't gained all the experiences that you need to get to our level, essentially. And then he like
That's
came
it.
back to his body. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's totally it. I mean, I think, I mean, there are many descriptions of the astral world and then the causal world, which is even closer to the divine reality, the thought world out of which everything comes. I mean, this is the journey we're on, the journey of discovery to experience that all. The rational mind, I don't think can really grasp it. I know there's a limit to what my rational mind can get, but it can be experienced. And so it's the consciousness that we want to expand our consciousness so that we live in that awareness.
sure. So one last question. So when Yogananda's guru came back and resurrected and came to see him that one day or one evening or whenever it was, and started giving him a map of the non-physical, like, have you seen that? Do you think that map is accurate? And can you explain that map to me?
He did map out. I mean, it's a longer conversation, but so he's sort of like the master of an astral planet. There are astral planets. So there's a whole light realm that's not physical, right? So it's not three-dimensional. And there's beings who don't incarnate back on Earth. They may reincarnate between that world and a subtler world. So they've already finished their Earth schooling. They have nothing more to do here. So they stay up there, but there's subtler worlds, higher worlds to go to. In other words, it's not just like one place. They're higher and higher and higher. In other words, the consciousness is more more closer to the divine reality, which is impossible for a mind to understand the divine reality. I mean, it's like one great mind that created this whole thing, a mind world.
Well, it just makes me even think even more, right? Like that, why does Guru Babaji stay here? Like if that he is such a thousand times more than Yogananda's consciousness, like why does he stay here to help us out?
I think that if not for the masters, this planet might destroy itself, or we might destroy it. I think it's to keep it together, actually. I've often felt, I mean, look how close we have come at times. Even if you go back to the 1960s with that Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, we probably have come close to self-destructing number of times, and yet we've not, and I believe we won't. People see an apocalypse. Well, I think we're going to be spared. Even with climate change, I think we're going to be spared because that's the whole purpose of them being here. Otherwise, you're right. Why would they be here?
Sure. But then again, it goes back to like if it's a subjective experience and we're only living in our own dimension, like what if some people may experience apocalypse, right? But if it's not in my reality or if it's not in my, you know what I mean? Like I'm not trying to say, all right, I'm disassociating myself from the collective reality. I'm going to live my own life. But I feel like, some people will experience apocalypse and some people won't. Like it depends on
Yeah,
your
I think you're
progression.
right. Somebody once asked Yogananda if there was such a place as hell, and he said, "Where do you think you are?" There are people on Earth now living in a hell realm. I mean, think about it. In the conflict areas, people who've lost, I mean, that's a hell realm. I can't imagine anything worse than in some of the conflict areas going on now. And yet there are people living in paradise
And
also.
bliss. Yeah.
And I think that you know, we can live in bliss despite what's going on in the world. And that's why it's like I felt it's like we shouldn't pay too much attention. I mean, you have to be a concerned citizen, right? And do what you need to do. But we can't get affected by it because our role is to lift the vibration of the planet. Those who are spiritually doing aware, we have to lift that vibration, which means bringing more joy and love and creating a celestial world to balance out all the negatives are being put out.
Sure.
And
Well, it's funny. I was also reading Yogananda recently, and he talks about was it a past life memory that he had when he was meditating on like the World War, and how he was saddened by it, and then went and had this memory of being, or he did something. He became like one of the captains of a battleship in the World War.
so that wasn't a past life memory. It was during World War I when he was meditating, and his consciousness got transferred to the battlefield where he sort of like saw and felt as if it was him, the death of a soldier. So it's like his consciousness just got projected into that place, and he felt himself dying. And then he woke up and realized that wasn't him.
Hmm.
It's
And then the divine consciousness presented him with this concept of life as being a movie, right?
Yeah.
Because he was so saddened by the events of the World War. And then after that, he experienced the projection, the light of the movie. And
all
to,
that, yeah, that the whole thing is, and which kind of goes back to what I was saying about the holographic projection. I mean, you see the images in a movie, they look so real, but it's just light. They're just being projected out of the light,
mm,
and he would often take devotees to the movies. Movies were new back then in the 1930s. And if character died, he would stay to see the beginning of the next movie to see that the character came alive again, which is like reincarnation. Someone didn't die, they just took a new body.
I love it. Tina, this has been awesome. This has been such a fantastic conversation. I cannot thank you enough for staying up so late and joining the show. How can people find
I
you?
I enjoyed talking to you. Well, I have a I have an author's page, and I do live readings there, and it's Dena Merriam Writes on Facebook. It's a Facebook page, Dena Merriam Writes, and my organization has a website. It's gpiw.org, Global Peace Initiative of Women. But really, I speak more on my Facebook page on Dena Merriam Writes. That's where I give talks.
Beautiful. Any last thoughts for people listening that you want to share, or you feel like it's on your heart that you want to get out there for the world?
I think all I want to say is I hope we can continue to put out positive energy, loving energy, joyous energy, because that's the way we can help people and the planet right now, is to continue to keep our vibration at a higher level, and and see that things are moving in a positive direction, even when they don't look like it.
Mhm.
And even if it takes time, 200 years, we're moving in a positive direction.
Beautiful. Dina, thank you so much.
Thank you, Trey. Been a pleasure.